Officials in New York City have voted to end the use of solitary confinement as punishment for all inmates under 21 years old. The unanimous decision will be in place by January 2016 and comes as the city's largest jail, Rikers Island, faces intense scrutiny over abusive practices. Donna Lieberman, executive director of the New York Civil Liberties Union, said an institution as profoundly broken as Rikers Island will require wholesale reform to transform into a humane environment that emphasizes treatment and rehabilitation over punishment and isolation. And these rules are a major step forward. Now, not everyone was so optimistic. The Corrections Officers Union President, Norman Seabrook, was critical of the vote, saying it would jeopardize officer safety. Well, joining me now is Taylor Pendergrass, Senior Staff Attorney at the New York Civil Liberties Union. So welcome, Taylor. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well, Caroline.
So this move puts Rikers at the forefront of prison reform regarding solitary confinement. I mean, do you think other jail systems are going to follow suit?
I certainly think so. I mean, what we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years throughout the United States is a reevaluation of the frequency that solitary confinement is used. And when we say solitary confinement, we mean being stuck in a prison cell 23 or 24 hours a day. Every prison system country in the entire country is using solitary confinement. And what we see at Rikers is both a major step forward and a demonstration of just how far we need to go to further these reforms.
And you know, we hear often the negative effects of solitary confinement, but talk to me, Taylor, about how that affects specifically juveniles.
Well, juveniles, as research and science shows, and I think as common sense would indicate, are particularly vulnerable to the harms of solitary confinement. Their brains are still developing, and the trauma that people experience in solitary confinement, that all healthy adults experience in solitary confinement, is particularly acute for juveniles, and the effects can be particularly long-lasting.
So when you look at other prison systems that are trying to reevaluate solitary confinement, what effects are you seeing when it's used less often, both for inmates and for the corrections officers?
Well, you know, this goes very much to the point that Mr. Seabrook is making. In states like Washington and Illinois and even New York State, where some of these reforms have started to take place, what we find, not surprisingly from our view, is that the day-to-day working conditions for staff, as well as levels of violence, actually go down. You know, one of the brutal ironies of the use of solitary confinement is that it's extremely counterproductive. When you put someone in a cell and warehouse them away for weeks or months or years at a time, they rarely, if ever, come out of that environment better off than they went in. So these reforms have actually made prisons and jails safer and better for staff, not worse.
And you know, Taylor, yet there are critics of this. I mean, what do you make of the comments from the union president who said that this vote is actually going to jeopardize officer safety?
I think it's just not at all based on the evidence that we've seen from other systems. I mean, certainly we, as everyone is, are concerned about making sure that the reforms improve everyone's safety and everyone's well-being. But when you look at how these reforms have actually been implemented in other systems, when it's been done right, it hasn't proven to cause any more violence or any more threats to officer safety. In fact, it's improved conditions in some instances. And certainly when you talk to corrections officials in other states who have been through these reforms, they're converts, they're believers. They see that when you make these changes on the ground, it actually improves conditions for staff, doesn't make them worse.